Pavlic.
I'm Sean O'Brien, and I haven't potted since the last podcast, which Sam destroyed and never published.
Okay, and on our show today, we actually have two guests. First one being Greg Mitchell.
Hello.
And the second one being Carsten Kotter, who you guys may know from Star City Games, fame and fortune.
Hi, guys. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So today we're going to start off with Greg talking about his finish at Star City Games Seattle, in which he placed first, which I actually called in round 2. I just want to have it out there that
It was all you, buddy.
you were my horse, and I'm not saying I won a lot of money, but good job.
But did you win a lot of money?
I don't think you want to say in a recording that you won money gambling on DCI events.
That
Exactly.
sounds like a reasonable idea, yes.
But you won a lot of money.
I did win a lot. Well, I won a lot of store credit, which turned into pretty sweet cards.
Yeah, I noticed the haul you got. So how about you give us a little tournament report of who you played, what you played, how you did, and then later when you're gone, we're going to criticize your plays.
Perfect. Thanks, Coach. Okay, so I played Bug Dover, Team America. I based the list on Bob Huang at Katsuke on the source, but made a bunch of changes because I didn't know which cards were good. A lot of the 13th and 14th finishers, just all the choices suck, so I just chose one of each. As far as the tournament goes, I think I definitely got pretty lucky facing the opponents I did. I started off with a Affinity opponent who couldn't find a mana source in 2 games, and then I played against round 2 was Sneak and Show. On the source, they're saying it's a bad matchup, but I've never felt like that was a bad matchup at all. Especially now that a lot of them don't even bring in Leyline.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. I don't think you have a bad matchup as long as they don't have a ley line.
I think the ley line is kind of a ruse anyway. I mean, it's a red herring. For as many times as they're going to actually get a 6-card keepable hand plus a white ley line, the math just isn't in their favor. I mean, the guy who can do that in all of his discard matchups in a 9-round tournament playing Sneak and Show, he's charmed anyway. You know what I mean? I don't...
He's already charmed.
Yeah.
And I know from the one time I played the deck that even if they have it, sometimes the bug decks just Golgari Charm it and then discard you anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe now that Golgari Charm is 2+ off in all the sideboards, it's gotten worse. But I remember when I was playtesting, basically the only thing with Storm I was afraid of was the leyline. And basically whenever I was playing some kind of black-based disruption deck, I mean, I don't play them a lot, but in testing I do once in a while. If they open on natural leyline and don't mulligan for it, you're in a really bad spot.
Yeah, but they are clearly blessed there. If they have a 6-card decent hand plus a white ley line, then it is their destiny. It is your destiny, Anakin.
It happens about half the time, right? All they need to do is turn a ley line into 2 turns.
Yeah. I mean, white ley line, not to derail it too further, but I mean, the nightmare for anyone who fears white ley line is white ley line backed up with either counter magic or Chalice. That's probably the worst case, right? But and I guess they can protect their ley line a little bit, but at that point they're not protecting their show and tell, which is what they really want to resolve, right?
Yeah, I think the role of leyline in the matchup is basically just to work as 2 time walks against Thoughtseize, mainly, so that they have time to try and fire off something before you can hit them with discard.
Yep.
Oh, I definitely agree. I mean, basically, you're trying to get to turn 3 to cast show and tell, ideally. They want the hand of 2 lands, a Sol land and a regular land. Ley line is number 3, show and tell is number 4, sneak attack is number 5, and then, 2 dudes, I guess?
It's almost...
Yeah, Magical Christmas Land. But really, they'll keep any hand that has Leyline and a cantrip.
This is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that Sacagawea you played did not have the white ley line.
He did not, or it didn't matter.
Yeah.
I don't think he did, though.
So you murdered him in his sleep, and then...
Right. Hey, he was a friendly enough guy. He asked me how I was doing throughout the tournament.
Well, did you tell him you won?
I think he disappeared before that.
Oh. Please continue.
I think I played against Thresh next. And that's always a really fun matchup. With all the tempo decks, it's sort of a little dance. Definitely a very intricate series of games.
Actually, I mean, I'll be honest, I was watching your Rug Delver matchup, and it really goes back and forth. I know there's an argument on the source about which is the kind of better deck and in what situation and whatever, but definitely you didn't. I was watching this game while you were playing, and you didn't make many mistakes, and your opponent was just. I wouldn't say he was making many mistakes, but there were definitely times when I was like, why did he do that? Oh, and you just capitalized on it, and it was. There was something with a Tarmogoyf. I can't remember exactly what, but you both had Tarmogoyf, and like he had Nibble Mongoose, but you had Delver, and then he ended up like losing both his guys, and you still had like Tarmogoyf or something.
Yeah, I don't remember. I feel like the Bug Delver player is definitely favored because of Deathrite blanking their dazes going long, and then the Abrupt case.
Well, something about like you have 24 mana sources, if I recall correctly, and they have 18, so it's like their whole mana denial package is quite a bit worse.
I mean, you're set up a little bit too with Disfigure. You hedged a little bit, right, against other Delver decks or Stoneforge decks. You got 2-main deck Disfigure.
Yeah, definitely. Disfigure is really good.
Did you ever at any point in the tournament yell, "My face" when you cast Disfigure?
If it had been SWAT, definitely.
All right, sorry, Carsten, go ahead.
It was something related to what was being said. I forgot to know, so it clearly wasn't too important. Oh yeah, I remember. Deathrite Shaman, I think, is incredibly important in Tempo Mirrors. I know that especially from when people here all played the Borg deck, the 4-color version.
Oh Jesus Christ! People still play that?
They
did.
Oh man.
No, they don't right now, but because most people here in Berlin stopped playing Tempo for the moment. But Deathrite Shamans they control Nimble Mongooses, and they make it so that you have a ton of extra mana sources, which is just insane in Tempo Mirrors.
Absolutely. Any hand that Bug Delver opens with Deathrite Shaman and like spells, it's just a snapshot.
Yeah.
Not even lands, just like...
Not even land. You just throw the Deathrite down and you're like, deal with my Shaman, bitch.
Right. I opened a lot of hands with Shaman in Seattle, and I won. And I didn't open a lot of hands with Shaman. Instead, I had a lot of hands with Delver at LA, and I didn't win. So I think that's pretty telling.
Yeah.
Interesting observation.
So after Rug Delver, what did you face?
Good question.
Give or take. Just like...
Hey, I'll bring up your article on Star City.
Yeah. I played Mud at some point. I think it was like when we were 4-0 or 5-0.
What Mud plus 5-0?
Cool to see Mud so deep.
What is this?
Yeah, really. I was shocked.
You opened up on Chalice every game.
Yeah, it's simple. You have to hit the good hands 4 times in a row. Well, 8 times.
Exactly.
Yeah, 8 times in a row.
That's what Mud is about. There's no deck that beats Mud as long as it gets its good hand. I don't think
That's
so.
true.
Well, maybe
like,
Belcher.
Turn 1 Turnisphere is pretty backbreaking.
I mean, all the Chalice decks are the same.
This guy had a phenomenal hand game 1. I was shocked that I beat him. He had a...
What kind of asshole Force of Will's then thought Caesars? That's what he was thinking. He's like, what are the chances? Like, who does that?
Right. Who plays a disruptive deck?
Wow. So proactive. Like...
Jeez. You're not dirtling around like standard? What is this?
You're playing spells on turn 1 and not tapped lands? Man.
Having cast several tens of thousands of Chalices over the last 5 years, that is the most depressing start. You're on the play, you have the Soul Land, and you have the fucking Chalice, and not only does it get forced, but then your next play just gets ripped. You know, it's just...
Well, but he was still in a pretty good position to win.
Right.
With the one spell that he had left in his hand. I took Wormcoil because I can't ever beat it ever.
Right.
And then he got to draw like 8 cards off Bodwood Cloister, but he just, I don't know. He wasn't able to remove my threats before I killed him.
What's the name of the game?
Well, it doesn't have that much removal, it's Mud.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all about the Ensnaring Bridge.
I've seen people put Ensnaring Bridge in Mud, and it just makes me cry. It's just like, are you such a coward that you're willing to play like the best card against you just because you're terrified of show and tell? Just play Spine.
I mean,
be a man.
I can see them in the sideboard. But I wouldn't main deck those.
It's awful. Maybe if you're playing Forge Masters or something, and you're so confident that you'll be able to forge it away and just Alpha Strike, but it just seems terrible. If you're bound and determined to just dedicate cards to show and tell, play the Spine. Just be a man.
Yeah, Spine's awesome. If he had Spine instead of some big dumb idiot that he cast, I definitely would have lost.
Spine.
And it's shocking that someone who goes 4-0 with Mud doesn't know how the interaction between Trinisphere and Lodestone Golem works.
That's tough.
Yeah.
That's really sad.
I cast Abrupt Decay, paying 3 mana, and he pointed at Lodestone Golem. And I was like, yeah, that's a Lodestone Golem. No, you have to pay another. No, I don't.
Wow. Just so basically, what I'm assuming is new to Legacy. Somebody hands him a mud deck because it's the only deck that they like don't want to play at this tournament, and he like randomly goes 4-0 and just like, but guys, I don't know how to play this. I'm just like jamming dudes.
But in all honesty, if you're reasonably new to Legacy, Mud is a pretty good deck for you, exactly because of this nature of, well, it has its sick hands, it wins.
Yeah. It's just a sequencing deck. You have to understand how to sequence things properly, and you have to look at the value of every card in your hand because you can't draw cards, with the exception of the Mighty Cloister. But you're so light on card drawing. Really, Mud, or Next Level Mud, as I'm gonna name my ebook, is it's just about valuing the lock pieces in your hand and sequencing them properly. But you can still be a complete chimp and just Ancient Tomb, Chalice on 1, and just beat, I would say, 60% of the decks in the format on the back of that alone.
Yeah, especially because I'm not going to say there's no skill in playing Mud, but if you just cast the lock piece you can pay for every turn, you're probably doing things okay.
Yep.
Well, I think my opponent learned that there definitely is skill to play Mud. He didn't cast his Wormcoil, instead he cast Sundering Titan.
Yes, I remember you talking to me about that.
Yeah, so he Sundering Titaned, blew up several of my lands, leaving me in Underground Sea, and then I swung back. I took a hit for 7, and then I killed him.
Yeah.
So if he cast Wormcoil instead...
No, definitely. As I said, I don't think it's totally skillless to play Mud. It's just, as long as your hands are good enough, you're fine just playing whatever you can most of the time.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So you faced a few other decks in like the elimination rounds, but like we all got to watch the top 8. So how was the top 8?
The top 8 was super stressful. I was definitely very nervous. I played against Miracles twice in a row, which the German guys from PT Paris said that that's an unfavorable matchup, which I was definitely surprised at the time. I'm still a little bit skeptical that it's worse than 50-50. It used to be that I thought it was very favorable for Bug Delver, but back then we were playing a full set of sinkholes.
In my personal opinion, I think it's about 50-50. Like, I've played from the Miracle side and from the Bug Delver side. It feels closer to 50-50. I don't think it's like 60-40 Bug Delver's favor, for sure.
Like it used to be when we played Sinkhole.
You were playing against, you played against the guy who had the main deck Red Blast, Pyroblast, right? That was, and like Venser and some other he only had a couple of Swords to Plowshares or something. There was something weird about his Miracle list, I think, right?
Yeah, I played against him in the quarters, and then I played against a guy with Adam Ruprecht playing, I think, 3 Stoneforge Mystic and Batterskull and Sword of the Meek. Yeah, I like that list a lot.
Yeah, but the prior guy, the guy you played in the quarters, only had 2 Swords to Plowshares, which it probably hurts him a little against you. Did you have an aggressive start against him, or?
Not especially. It's really just managing your threats, not playing. Like you can play a Deathrite and another threat because Deathrite on its own is such a slow clock. It's like half a card at most in the matchup. It's more important to just cast your disruption spells on time.
Carsten?
Yeah, my experience with the matchup is that Miracles is clearly favored. It goes down the more Lilianas the bug deck has access to, but it's clearly not a blowout in either direction, that's for sure. And I think the current Miracles lists people play, for some reason, don't run a full set of counterbalances, so that definitely helps bug a lot.
Absolutely. Philip Schoeniger talked about like sideboarding out the counterbalances and taking out the rest in pieces with the assumption that Bug Delver players would be bringing in Golgari Charm. I don't know if my opponent did that, but what do you think about that plan?
I think it's a terrible plan. The thing is, why would you have like for this Abrupt Decays and a couple of charms Golgari Charms to get rid of my enchantments. The thing is, all I'm interested in is prolonging the game, so if you spend your mana on killing my stuff, I'm totally fine with that. What I don't want you to do is keep creatures in play. All I want to do is gem spell Miracle-style threat every turn, like removal or counterbalance, until something sticks, and the game just ends.
I completely agree. Counterbalance is terrifying for Bug Delver. Even though we have Abrupt Decay, you still have to draw it.
Yeah, and if I get 4 or 5 time walks out of it, I'm probably not losing that game.
Let's pause for a minute and all remember that time walk, in fact, is time walk. And some of these other things aren't time walks. And Carsten...
If my opponent doesn't play anything for 5 turns, that's time walks to me.
Well, having played a decent amount of Vintage, time walk is still time walk because time walk does the one thing that, actual fake time walks don't do, which is give you an entire turn, and a turn is the most valuable thing in Magic.
Whoa,
let's just remember. Even if you are just looking at it.
Trinisphere is also a time walk, though.
No, because you got to draw a card, and you got to play a land as a special action, and you got to do some things. But it is impeding your opponent's plan, and
Sean, you're being pedantic.
Yeah, well, we'll give you 6 uses of the word tempo. It gains you back some tempo. How's that?
Yeah, okay, it's not a true time walk, sure.
It doesn't cost enough money, that's the problem as well.
That's true. It doesn't have
yeah.
value.
Yeah, and counterbalances cost too much money. With their double blue, they don't have a colorless in their cross dicey.
I have heard that before, though. I've heard Miracles players just sort of frown, and any deck you get with Abrupt Decay, they just automatically side their counterbalances out, and I always think that's a little bit reassuring, because a lot of times, it's a hard.
It just means you're not threatening anymore. You can't do that.
Yeah.
One of.
Although Rest in Peace is pretty hit or miss. I killed my quarterfinals opponent with a Rest in Peace in play. I was just attacking with 1/2s.
Yeah.
One 2 and a Delver is still a pretty fast clock.
I've died to Norwood Ranger before. It's embarrassing.
Definitely true.
What about your finals matchup against Batman?
Okay, so we play in locals pretty often. He plays Death and Taxes almost all the time. So I've played him in his particular build before. It was a fun match. He was keeping it pretty loose, both in play and in atmosphere.
I think that's a pretty good, to be able to play against somebody you've played against at your local in the finals. That's got to be a help rather than somebody either you hate eternally or just some socially inept neckbeard that you can't even communicate with. So that's cool that you got to play at local.
Yeah, the top 4 was all people who play at the local store.
Oh, okay, cool.
Good results.
Definitely, yeah. So he was joking around a lot. I think you could see on stream that he would point to random things with his Wasteland or Sword of Fire and Ice. I think at the end he was playing for camera time. That was his out. More camera time.
I think that's there were already so few people in the hall at that time. He's just Sword of Fire and Ice, your planes. I think that's slightly acceptable just to confuse people who are watching the stream going what the fuck is he doing? I don't even know. And the commentator's what? What?
I was there and I was what the fuck is he doing?
That's a pretty good position to get your opponent into, though.
True. The Aether Vial thing was something I don't think the commentators picked up on, but it was bizarre. So he had Thalia on board, 3 lands, including a port. He had an Aether Vial in play already, and he played an Aether Vial, tapping 1 mana. In the position I was in, if he had ported me, it would have been really bad. He might have actually won the finals. But the judges correctly pointed out that it costs 2, and he asked a very peculiar question. He didn't ask, "Can I take it back?" or "What happens?" He said, "Can I let the Aether Vial get countered?" And of course, the judge has to respond, "No.
Right.
You can't let the Aether Vial get countered. You may pay 2 for it, though." So he chose to do that instead of just,
Could he have taken it back, though? His take backs is there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's an illegal casting of the spell.
Okay.
Yeah, you eat the GRV. I mean, I'm assuming at this point you didn't have any GRVs for the day, right? So you just eat a GRV and... It
didn't matter. I would have been game lost out of that tournament on GRVs if they had been keeping track in that finals. I was just exhausted.
Yeah, that's true.
Even after all that coffee with me, you were still exhausted? Oh.
Surprisingly.
I think that's somewhat regular occurrence in Star City top 8s from what I've seen in the coverage, because people often play in ways that probably wouldn't have gotten them through the Swiss. And I know how tough it is to play when you've already played 8 rounds. So I expect most people are playing a lot worse during the top 8 than they have been during the day.
Absolutely true. And also a lot of people sort of lose focus when they split. like Jacob Corey last week, he split the finals, and it seemed like he pretty much just lost his drive to win.
I know this situation myself. I have the same tendency to not take things as seriously anymore.
Well,
Oh, and Jacob, sorry if I got that wrong. That's just what it seemed like on my perspective.
No, we all know Jacob's a quitter, so I think it's fine. It falls right in line with what we've already known.
so I am very happy to hear that you did well at Star City Games. You won some money. You bought some cool pimp.
Mm-hmm.
What time do you have to go, though?
I probably should get going. I'm judging the PTQ today.
Oh, you're judging the whole thing?
No, I'm not
Oh.
head judge. I'm team lead for logistics.
Oh, whatever.
But yeah, Seattle PTQs are pretty big though.
They're like, what,
It's-
220?
There's not as many.
220? Average number? Eight.
They're preparing for 400.
Jesus Christ.
I don't know
God.
if they'll get that many, but that's what they have space for it. They have staff for it.
Hey, there's a
That's pretty sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's a bronze marker in your marker cup on your table there. I left to get my shit signed with.
Okay.
Sweet. Thank you. Hey, and also mail your shit for GP. Oh no, Casey's coming to GP Atlanta, so he can bring your stuff. I can get your stuff signed there.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. Hey, well, Carsten, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Thanks. And see you guys
And
later.
Greg, we'll have you on maybe at a later date just so you can talk more because I know this was kind of rushed and everything.
Yeah.
I
sounds
appreciate
good.
you coming on, though.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much,
All
Greg.
right, later, man.
That's it.
Bye.
So that is unfortunate that Mr. Greg had to leave us. But now we can talk about anything we want to. So I actually wanted to move on and talk about, a lot of people have been hyping up this, what people are calling the new Noble Fish deck, or it's also being called Bara Bant, named after the source member, Bara, Bahra, who's been playing this Noble Fish deck on Moto for, I don't know, I guess, the last 2 weeks or so, and has gone like 14-2. So I'll just quickly read off the list, and then we're gonna just basically talk about it a little bit. So 20 land mana base, Flooded Strand, Misty Rainforest, Wasteland, Tundra, Tropical Island, Savannah, and then one of each of the Forest Island. The rest of the dual count doesn't matter. The creatures, though: 4 Judges Familiar, 4 Noble Hierarch, 4 Stoneforge, 3 Edric, Spymaster of Trust, 2 Looter Ilkor, 2 True to Nemesis, 2 Mother of Runes. Then our non-creature spells are 4 Brainstorm, 4 Swords, 4 Force, 4 Daze, 1 Jeet, 1 Sword of Fire and Ice, 1 Batterskull. So let's talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, so this looks like very similar. I think the name share is a giveaway to a vintage list called Noble Fish, which is mana denial, efficient creatures, counter spells, and a draw engine. And looks like it shares a lot of the same principles of that. In vintage, there's some cross-cutting cards like Stony Silence that are kind of bricks. Well, not bricks, but in Legacy, I think you're better off just playing Stoneforge. So it looks similar. Shares the Wastelands. Judge's Familiar is sort of a soft. It's not really mana denial, I guess, but it's a tax effect.
Well, the deck's Curse Catcher, kind of.
Yeah, exactly, like Curse Catcher.
It's also, too, it has evasion, so you're drawing cards with Edric, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and you've got a good thing to attach equipment to. So, looks similar. I mean, I guess it's just another tempo deck. In this case, it's going to rely more on Hierarch. I guess the other feature of note is total lack of reliance on the graveyard, which we've talked about before on other podcasts. Building either junk shells or Bant shells or any other green-based creature decks that don't use the graveyard, which gives you access to Rest in Peace and also cuts off a lot of your opponent's sideboard cards.
Carsten, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen the deck in action. It makes me think of, I'm not sure if anybody remembered this, back when GP Barcelona happened, and nobody was playing Stoneforge in Legacy. There was this Vial-based fish deck that used Stoneforges for Sword of Fire and Ice. That was before Batterskulls. That looks a lot
Yes.
similar.
I remember that deck.
It looks a lot like this, actually, I think. With, just the basics. It doesn't have the Vials, and it has things like Mother of Runes that deck didn't have, but just the disruption package is similar. The whole Stoneforge thing as the main big creature threat. That's what reminds me of it.
Yeah, the other thing I guess of note is, and I'm looking at the list here that was on the source, things like 2 Mother of Runes, that drives me nuts. I mean, Mother of Runes, her value is so much greater early. I don't know what list you're looking at.
I'm looking at the same list you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the stairs.
Yeah, that kind of drives me bonkers. I mean,
That's probably a work in progress list, though. I assume it's changed maybe since this post has been made.
yeah, no, that's fair enough. But couple of things, right? It looks like you always have a turn one play, which is nice, which is a hallmark of a tempo deck, right? And maybe he's just looking at 10 turn one plays, and he's slotted, 4 familiar, 4 hierarchs, probably a given, right? And then I guess the familiar in this particular build he's got or he's trying is better than Mother. But I think in a and he has days, but in force, but I think the back-to-back play of Mother Stoneforge is so strong. Being able to protect her in a world of abrupt decays is really, really strong. It's tough.
Yeah, I really hate that play.
While I agree, and was really kind of weirded out by seeing 2 Mother of Runes, in a certain way it makes sense. Do you know if this guy is from Europe or from the US?
I believe he's from Europe.
Which would make sense because, as far as I am informed about the rest of the metagame, definitely for my local one, there's a lot more miracles and combo around in Europe than there is Stoneblade compared to the US. So Mother of Runes is not particularly good against either of those decks.
Right. I mean, Mother of Runes is good against miracles if she is protecting the Kithkin Advisor, but that's about it.
Sure.
I noticed one thing. A few things kind of jump out at me that people kind of have maybe forgotten about. Noble Hierarch. So we haven't seen Noble Hierarch in a while, but I'm pretty sure, like, if everybody kind of sits down and thinks about it, Deathrite Shaman is really good, but if other people are playing Deathrite Shamans, are your Deathrite Shamans actually producing mana? Maybe not. So Noble Hierarch in this deck is obviously producing all the colors you needed to, and giving Exalted, and not getting cockblocked by other Deathrite Shamans.
And it's worth $60 now.
Yeah, and you can play with your modern stables in Legacy, right?
You can play with your modern ones, yeah.
So then, yeah, the 2 Mother Runes and the 2 True Nemesis are kind of like a little bit meh for me. I think I'd want more True Nemesis, but that's whatever. Looter Ilkor is also really cool, because I haven't seen this card in a couple years. People just haven't been playing it. People have forgotten about Shadow, and just how good Shadow is with equipment. And
so,
I was wondering...
That card is a piece of shit. I can't possibly see playing that over Cold-Eyed Selkie or some other equally... I mean, a Pride Mage, or 2 Pride Mages, that card to me is just balls.
What? You don't like to looter?
I could play a Cold-Eyed Selkie and Ancestral. I mean, I just would rather do that. Or have access to, like... I'm looking at the curve. It looks like he maybe was short on 2s, right? We've got...
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is definitely filling the 2 slot.
So,
Definitely.
I don't know. Pride Mage is really strong. So, but I get it that it evades. I get you're kind of all in on Edric. Or a little more all in on Edric, but...
Looking at the blue count, I think you might need a blue card there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meddling Mage?
Looks like it.
God, there's just better cards. I don't know. I'd have to look and see. But a 1/1 that loots just...
Oh, I agree that the card itself is not all that impressive, so that's probably where I would look for if I needed room too, but I think it makes sense to have a blue 2-drop in that slot.
Yeah,
Also,
I think Meddling Mage, like, for me, if you look at a lot of the cards that hose him, Meddling Mage would give him some game 1 game against combo, right? He's already got counter spells. Now you back it up with Meddling Mage. He could name Abrupt Decay, which is killer against any of the Abrupt Decay decks.
Terminus.
Yeah.
Terminus, yeah. Meddling Mage sounds good for that slot.
Anyway, but Meddling Mage requires a little bit of finesse. Looter, he could probably just jam it, attack, and, do his cards. So, whatever.
So then obviously the weird inclusion that everybody's talking about is Edric. So what is Edric doing? Like, so Sean was saying before, like, you need a draw engine. You can't just, Death and Taxes, the problem with Death and Taxes right now is, like, cool, you get all your guys out, suddenly you're facing down some bigger guys, they remove all your stuff, and you don't have a draw engine. Edric, pretty good. You got a lot of guys with evasion, you put equipment on them, they're all drawing cards. You're drawing between 1 and 3 cards every attack step if you've got enough guys out. And I'm a big fan of drawing cards. I like my Sylvan Libraries. I also like Edric. It's a reason why this card was like $4 for a long time, and then now it's like $25.
Somebody found a home for it.
Yeah, so congratulations on finding a home for this card.
Well, he's been popular in Vintage. If you go search any of the Vintage, Vintage deck sites, TC Decks or whatever, you'll see Edric every month was in a top 8 somewhere. He's been real strong in Vintage. Granted, there are less blockers. So, but yeah, finding a Legacy home is a good deal. Another guy that I would probably want somewhere in this 75 I know he's not playing Green Sun, but to me, Trigon Predator right now is a pretty good hedge against in the equipment mirror. I mean, he is just a beast. Actually, I think he literally is a beast. Like, I think that's his creature type now.
Carsten, did you want to say something?
I was going to say something, but once again I have to remember what it was because I started listening. Oh yeah, it's interesting how shaving a mana of Coastal Piracy suddenly makes it really good.
Don't we have new Coastal Piracy? Isn't there some kind of shitbox
thing
from Theros?
Trident?
What is it called? Oh, the
Trident
Trident.
of Thassa?
Yeah,
That
sorry.
thing?
Yeah. Theros is just like a bad dream. It's just like, I'm just trying to forget it and like just take Stormbreath Dragon and just move on from that entire block of just horrible cards.
I think I'm in the unique position of actually thinking it's pretty good for us that Legacy hasn't gotten a ton of cards since Return to Ravnica, because the cards they print usually have a power level that's so that it's shifting a lot, so it takes a lot of time for things to settle. We could do with something new by now, I think, but I think it was good that we had time to play everything out so far.
I mean, I don't mind it from a financial perspective. I mean, my investment in Legacy now is just buying more beta stuff and pimping out certain cards I don't have. So it's like having, spent $100 on this block or $150 on getting everything I want in Russian is almost unheard of. So that's fine. But I think we have a new window now with Commander and some of these other one-off sets, which is a great way. I think that's a great way to introduce Eternal cards.
Yeah, I agree.
As long as they print enough of the damn boxes, like...
I don't know why you're crying. I had all my stuff a week after the set came out. Actually, I had two German true names the day of Eternal Weekend, ready to go. I didn't play them, but I had them. I wore them as a necklace. But I didn't have any problems getting stuff. You just have to have access to eBay.de.
Well.
But you always keep up and stick up for the common man, Matt, and that's why people love you.
I try my best. Even though I have 39 beta dual lands. Not common. That's okay. So I actually wanted to, because we have you on the show, Carsten, I wanted you to talk about maybe the differences that you see, because you write for Star City Games, the differences you see between the European Legacy and the American Legacy kind of formats. And I mean, we were talking a little bit about this before, just in the amount of Stoneblade versus Miracles. So do you maybe want to give us the breakdown of like what's going on in Europe and how it's a little bit different?
Well, I mean, my impressions obviously not representative because I'm sitting here in Berlin and Europe's pretty big, and we don't have anything like the Star City circuits, so we don't have. I don't have brilliant information of what's going on in Europe, but generally speaking, my impression is that Europeans tend to play more combo than is getting played in the US, and as a result, decks like Miracles are a lot more well liked here because they have very good Storm matchups, and. Yeah, I think Americans for some reason all love the Blade deck, and I mean it's a good deck, but I don't think it should have the metagame representation it has over in the Star City circuit in the US, and I think it might have something to do also with the simple fact that a lot of the people that go to Legacy Opens want something that plays similarly to the formats they used to, and a Blade deck, while complex, gives you a normal game of Magic. You just playing your threats, disrupting the opponent a little, dropping down good beatdown threats, and control the game and the battlefield. While the combo decks and something like Miracles don't play like what modern Magic players are used to.
No, in Europe, and I've been to Bazaar Moxen, but in Europe I find more dedicated Eternal players. In the US, I would say it's the complete opposite. You've got dedicated standard draft players, and they just happen to duct tape this other tournament on the Sunday of the Star City, so why not play it? And you're either borrowing a deck or you've just got this deck that you keep around for when Star City rolls through. So it's very true. And you playing match by match, you can see the inexperience in a lot of the players, just in terms of not even understanding sort of the dynamics of Stoneforge. E.g. always going for Batterskull when it's not the right call, but sometimes they just win those matches because the opponent doesn't happen to have removal or they have the force and they just win anyway. But the deck is very popular. It was also a pretty popular standard deck, so maybe you've got that same group of people who played whatever that deck was called in standard, and they're just used to it. The old Jace Stoneforge deck. I think it all eventually got banned, but
Yeah, which, seeing how the deck is doing Legacy, probably made a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I agree. You definitely see a lot less Storm Combo and Miracles. I mean, I was at SCG Seattle, and there were Miracles players. I was playing Miracles at the time, but I just didn't see a ton of Storm Combo, which is actually quite good right now, or was good. And then not a lot of Miracles. Like, I didn't really face a mirror match. I had a lot of good matchups all the way through. I mean, and you can definitely tell the experience level. I mean, I met a few people who were definitely like, you have been playing Legacy since, you know, the early 2000s when it's still 1.5, like format knowledge and everything. But yeah,
Actually, haven't.
really,
I started Legacy when I moved out of France, which was, funnily enough, exactly the year Brainstorm got banned in restricted in Vintage. And when I moved to Berlin, there was no Vintage scene. I'm originally a Vintage player, so I decided, well, let's check out Legacy, and it was a lot of fun. So I kept
well, you
playing
got to
that.
play with 4 Brainstorm this time. Again, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, well, I never truly experienced the Vintage with 1 Brainstorm because I moved basically the moment they banned it. So it's not like I stopped Vintage because they restricted Brainstorm. It's more like I couldn't play Vintage anymore when they restricted Brainstorm because where I was, there
You
was
like,
no
screw
Vintage
France,
scene.
I'm leaving. You restricted Brainstorm. Bye.
Yeah, kind of.
So, like, you were just talking about how the fact that there was not a tournament circuit similar to Star City Games in Europe. What do you think about, like, why is there no demand for a Star City Games like circuit?
I think there would probably be demand. It's just that uh, it being so many different countries, it's probably rather difficult to organize. I'm honestly not sure because I don't have the experience or resources trying to organize it. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think there is any as big vendor as Star City, and nobody is organizing those tournaments. I'm not. I know a lot of people who would want to go to them.
I mean, if you were willing to get and drive around, I mean, there's always a big monthly in Spain. Then there's another big monthly in Italy. Then there's another big monthly in Germany, and there's a big one in. I mean, you could get in your car and drive around. The folks,
Yeah,
it would just be a lot. It would be a busy month,
yeah. I think part of that is also that in Europe we're a lot less used to traveling long distances than in the US. Like Europeans will usually plan for a while before they take a trip to Italy instead of just jamming it in the car.
What about Eurorail?
Uh, Trains are
Oh.
horribly expensive.
They are very expensive. And like there is a certain, I mean, my experience at Bazaar Moxon, I would say, besides ending up in the hospital, everything went really smoothly despite all of the language differences and everything. I was impressed with how the staff handled things. I think it's still a little bit of a logistical nightmare to deal with it. Just the judge staff you have to have in place, right? I mean, I think the default is that they want everybody to sort of be in English, but you can't expect everybody to speak English. It's ridiculous. But even like the Liga de Catalonia de Legacy, the Spanish league, I think they do monthlies. They get 120, 130, and that's just North Spain, right? So that's not that far off of a Star City.
Yeah,
right?
so maybe the individual tournaments, like, you don't even need it. That could be. Yeah, you're right. Like, if everybody's just getting their own local tournament that's pulling, 100, 150 people, do you need a Star City that's going to maybe, hit 4?
Right. I mean, our local.
But the feeling is different. That's, I think, what most of us are. Most Europeans or players I know that want to have something like Star City, what they're missing is big events feel a lot different from a 100-player event that is reasonably
It's
local.
true. You get a lot more players in from, like, out of town, and you get to see people, and you get to travel. It's an experience.
The European ones are especially fun because you get the added dimension of countries. You know what I mean? Like Bazaar, it just felt like, oh, here are these 3 German guys, and these German guys are doing well. And then you had the Russian guys who were all trying to like bend us over a barrel and pump us for their Russian cards. And then you had like the French guys whose cards nobody wanted, and like they all kind of hung out with each other. And then you had all the Italian guys who everybody was kind of wary of. I don't know why that was, but. And then you had the Spanish guys who were like super friendly guys, and that's who I ended up hanging out with. And then you had a few of us Americans, but it's kind of cool that added dimension is actually a little bit fun in these bigger European tournaments.
Yeah, you meet a lot of people from a lot of different countries because Europe has so many of them in such a comparatively small room.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, the I guess the logistics of getting people across the ocean, it is kind of cost prohibitive. But even something like Eternal Weekend, last year with Legacy champs and Vintage champs. There was a good, probably half a dozen German guys, another half a dozen Italian guys. Even that was fun, and that was somewhat well represented. It was probably still 75% American, but that was even a good time. Any big event always feels, it feels more interesting. There's more gravitas to it. You're usually a little bit more focused.
Yeah, it feels more like you're doing a real big battle for the win instead of, well, I know half the players here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my tactic at these large tournaments is just when I sit across from somebody, I just make sure that I get myself into a mindset where I just hate them eternally, and that way I focus and I play well and I don't make errors. At my locals, I just like everybody. Well, I don't necessarily like everybody, but yeah, I definitely don't play as tight in my local at all, and I make terrible mistakes quite often. Or I just bring horrible decks, in which case
Well, that's what locals are for, kind of, among other things.
Yeah.
Just trying out random decks you want to, because, well, they're not big events.
Yeah,
so.
there's usually not a lot of money on the line, so you might as well just fool around and, try to see if this idea is going to work.
Yeah, Cavern of Humans has been giving me a good run here, but it might be time to retire it. As fun as Glow Rider is, he's just not fit for battle.
So, moving on, I think if we want to talk about any insane plays you had, maybe in the past couple of weeks, any plays you made or saw, or any cool pickups or cool stories, anything like that. So maybe Carsten, if you want to start, or if you want some time to think.
I don't have any great plays right now. So
well, anything that you saw, even if it wasn't your play.
Well, there's something. I hope nobody is taking that personally, but in the not any one of you, but the person who made it. As I said, I'm terrible with names. I would have to check. In the Star City Invitational semifinals, I was really shocked when the Storm player lost because I was watching the 5th match of the semis. I think it was the 5th, and I was like, okay, opponent is dead. I can do something else now. And I switched back to the stream 2 minutes later, and they hadn't killed him. And I think that illustrates something about Storm, about the complexity level, which is why I find it interesting, because when I saw his hand, I immediately knew the opponent was dead. His hand was 2 lands. He had 1 land in play. His opponent had just clicked him on end step, and it was his second turn, so he could play a second land. He had Dark Ritual, LED, Grim Tutor, Past and Flames in hand, and the second land he could drop out.
Yeah, he's dead.
So, the interesting thing is the Storm player probed twice that turn too, but into random stuff, and it seems he didn't see the kill, because he didn't kill his opponent.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that is interesting in that is that there are so many specialized lines you need to remember with the deck, that if you haven't had that hand before, it's not evident that you're actually killing your opponent with it. It looks very innocuous. You have 6 mana and a tutor.
Right. Yeah, I think
7 mana.
People that deck suffers. So this is in the semis, right? This is the top 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's your mental fatigue, right? Like for all you know, that player actually has seen that line before. If he was just playing show and tell, he might have just derped an Emrakul into play. Whereas, he's 12 hours deep into his experience, and his brain just isn't firing, on all cylinders.
I completely know the situation. I've thrown a lot of matches with Storm just where afterwards I would have asked myself, God, man, you're so bad. How did you do that? It's just because first you have to concentrate all the time, and second, there's so many things you have to think about that you miss that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's an actual tangible disadvantage of playing a deck like that. People don't talk a lot about. People like to talk about the metagame like it's absolute and it just has to do with the 75s, but it's not. It has to do with card availability. It has to do with player preference. It has to do with the complexity of the deck versus the amount of time people are willing to put into Legacy. So when you say that a deck like, Storm, any of the Storm variants, people say, well, they're not a deck to beat. It's not necessarily because the 75 is awful. It's a lot of other it's a confluence of other factors. A certain subsegment of players will just never pick that deck up. Period. And
that's for sure.
And so you just cut yourself off. It's not even. It's not like we're all picking race cars out of a lineup. So a deck in isolation, analyzing a deck in isolation as powerful or not powerful, can sometimes be a tool, even if it's quote unquote not in the meta. It's still a great deck, but It could be card availability, it could be the complexity, and it could be the fact that I know probably half of my store, players that play at my store, given all the cards, and I have all the cards. There are probably 3 people at the store who could essentially loan any deck out easily. Would never play show and tell, never play sneak show ever. They just don't want to. You know what I mean? It's not because it isn't powerful. It's not because it isn't relatively simple to play. It's because they just wouldn't play that deck. They just wouldn't play it. It's just like, it's a chip deck. I don't want to play it. It's just, Ancient Tomb Island showing. It's just, I don't want to spend my $40 in my entire Sunday doing that. It's just not actually interesting.
Yeah, it's basically what I've never done it so far, so I can totally understand.
Yeah. So how do you factor that into the metagame? Honestly, if all of us picked up show and tell, or sorry, if that's whatever you want to call that psychological factor or that play style preference, if you kick that out the window, the deck might 4 of every top 8, because it is just so absurdly powerful, and it jumps on any slow draw, and it's probably more powerful than we give it credit for,
I think that's something that is true for most of Legacy, actually.
Yeah.
Like, not only not the power level thing, but that what people want to play shapes what the metagame is like. Because there are a lot of decks out there that could see play, but that nearly see no play, and then someone makes them famous and people start playing it, but they never fully catch on because there are not enough players that enjoy this type of deck.
Right. Belcher's another one, right? I would never devote an entire Sunday of my life, $40, and a chance to play 9 rounds of Magic and play Belcher. It would just be a waste of time,
Oh no, I already did that. Back when people invented Belcher in Vintage. I was one of the first people who saw the list and thought, hey, that looks fun, let me build that as a fun deck. And I started goldfishing it. It had like 50% on 1 kills, and decided, hey, I want to see what this does in a tournament. This is insane. Remember, this was before people had really broken Storm in Vintage, so people simply were not used to getting killed on turn 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Could
you play 4 LEDs? Was that no?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you played.
Sure. That was before that.
Oh.
And it's actually quite fun.
I guess so.
For the first time.
I just can't picture 9 rounds of it, and just flipping a coin as to whether my opponent has permission.
It's a lot less fun once you and your opponent both know how the deck works.
Yeah.
Because the opponent knows he just has to mulligan into force, and well, I just have to go for it and hope it works.
Right.
But
an interesting question to ask sometimes when you look at a deck is if half, if 40% or a third or half the field played this deck, would it be snap? Would some card in it just be snap banned? You know what I mean? And I think that's an example. That's an example of a deck where if a GP ever happened and a third of the field was playing Belcher, it would just be such a humiliating embarrassment that they would have to ban something in it, either Diamond or Burning Wish or the Belcher or whatever.
That's for sure. I think that would happen with basically any combo deck.
Yeah.
To be honest, just looking at Wizards' policy towards combo decks, if there's any combo deck that gets 30% of the playing field, they would ban something from it.
Look at the eggs deck. That was miserable. And at least Belcher, you can go get lunch, but the eggs, that miserable eggs deck, that thing was doomed the moment it was on camera, taking 30 minutes to resolve a turn.
I really liked that deck.
Oh God.
I thought it looked fun.
But
the
fun
deck
for
just
your opponent.
It just benefits no one. It's just modern's a different animal anyway, in that it can be frustrating. You could devote 8 cards of hate in your sideboard in Modern against eggs. And Modern, there's just no good tutoring, card movement, filtering. So you're just playing against the egg deck, desperately trying to draw your Stony Silence or your whatever, and you just can't find it, and you want to shoot yourself in the head. At least in Legacy, you've got a chance maybe to tutor up your hate or brainstorm into it or whatever.
Yeah, or just by time. This is a Legacy broadcast, but not a Bonon broadcast. But I think that was one of the biggest problems in Modern, simply that there's not something like simple counterspell, something that is not good in a combo deck, but that allows control decks to just stop combo cold for low mana, no matter how much mana they have. Because of that, they have to ban so much, I think.
Yeah, Mana Leak was which is still a criminally underplayed card in Modern. But yeah, I got the feeling too. The decks in Modern just felt a little, and still feel a little stiff. And you feel like you don't have you fan your opening 7 in Modern, and oftentimes you just feel like that's pretty much what's going to win you or lose you the game. Whereas in Legacy, with all of the cantrips, things like Sylvan Library, and just powerful cards, you've got a little bit more play to your hand and your deck, and you don't necessarily feel like you're going to lose on the back of your 7, right? Modern, there are some decks where you're just literally going to be peeling cards off the top of your library. I think that's one of the reasons the pod deck is so powerful. Is it's one of the few decks that has a lot of play, redundancy, and tutoring.
Yeah, it's just insanely flexible too.
Yeah,
which is great.
All right, there was our 38 seconds of Modern for every dude.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an insane play. I just think it was a funny play. If it's worth talking about. So I was playing Agrolome for some reason last Thursday because why not? And a newer player had just built Death and Taxes and was like really excited, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to crush this guy, but all right, I'll do it. And I'm still on the old Devastating Dreams list because I still think Devastating Dreams is a really good card. It's just it doesn't deal with True Nemesis. So I think if you're going to be playing Devastating Dreams, you've basically got to do it on turn 2 to like wipe out Stoneforge Mystic, something else, and 2 lands. Like I think that's perfectly fine. I'm also running.
Who cares if they have a true name if you have a Terravore that's 12,
exactly.
12.
I'm also running like Kessig Wolf Run and more Terravores.
Yeah.
So I really think this deck has some potential, right? Like basically you just Seismic Assault them out if you can't get around their True Nemesis or Punishing Fires or whatever, or you just Dreams out the board and swing for a lot. Anyway, the point being is he's got like this board built up of, a bunch of like X1s and X2s, and I've got like a big Crusher and, a Goyf and a Terravore, and we're kind of going back and forth, and I'm trying to get Punishing Fires online, but he's like, I don't have a Loam yet, and he's wastelanded away my Groves, and I just kind of Sylvan Library into Devastating Dreams with a full grip and just like drop 6 cards, destroy 6 lands, all my creatures survive, alpha him for infinite. Felt good. I'm just saying he'd never seen Devastating Dreams before, so felt good.
You actually devastated his dream.
I did. And I really wish Modern had Devastating Dreams, so Loam could be a real deck.
They have Poon Jab, or what is it? No, Flame Jab.
Not good enough.
You can slowly jab people.
I think that's missing the Armageddon.
Yeah, Armageddon seems pretty good.
Yeah, I've played Boom Bust in Modern, and people in Modern, when they draw a land in Modern, if they have not played a land, they just play the land. It's like an autopilot move in Modern. A deck that requires only 3 lands will simply just play 12 lands out if they have them. So if you had an Armageddon effect in Modern, it's even more devastating because people don't sandbag lands for Brainstorm or anything. And WotC, I think, frowns upon land destruction in general, but Armageddon, stuff like Armageddon, I think they see as kind of an unfun thing. I doubt they'd ever add it to Modern.
Oh, feels good, though.
Oh, it feels wonderful to destroy people's lands. It's fantastic when your opponent just can't even begin to do the most fundamental thing in Magic, which is to place a spell on the stack.
How many of you guys have started playing before 2000?
Me.
Oh, I've been playing.
You're the only one?
I've been playing since '94. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not surprised you guys don't have problems with land destruction and Armageddon. Same reason I don't, but I think that's because we're used to it. We learned to play with those effects.
I mean, all I played in Vintage, in the 94, 95, 96 was basically mono black or black blue land destruction. There is a school of Magic named after me, and it is a school of pain and land destruction and black vices. And it was just it's a proactive strategy. It's prison doesn't get any love because they've just crippled so many of the cards between banning Vice and crippling Winter Orb and cards like, it seems subtle, but even a card like Daze has a lot of impact on a card like Sinkhole that used to be such a sweet card. But if you play Vintage, you still get to play Prison. Legacy, it's still tougher. Death and Taxes is probably the closest thing to a Prison deck we have.
Yeah, Death and Taxes is kind of Legacy's Prison deck, at least among the top tier archetypes that see a lot of play.
Yeah, what's missing from the Prison strategy is either filtering or card draw at the moment. I mean, there's nothing in Legacy where you're like, cool, I have Loadsome Golems, I have Suppression Fields, I have this and that, but I don't do anything else. And if I don't hit these in the right order, I'm just not getting there.
Yeah, that's why I always thought White Stacks wasn't really playable in Legacy, just because it's a control deck that doesn't have library manipulation, at least not good library manipulation.
Now, I will say this. The deck was not too bad about 6 or 7 years ago, because I used to play it. It was one of my kind of starter Legacy decks that I was, more tournament stuff that I wasn't brewing myself, and deck was okay. Because I ran Crystal Ball back in the day, or I added Crystal Ball when it came out, whatever, and it was okay. However, using Gotthardammerung to kill everyone's lands, again, I can't...
Yes, Gotthardammerung. I mean, it goes along with most of the other Chalice decks. It's an open hand deck. If your opening hand is good and powerful and you happen to also be on the play, you look like a champion. And this has happened to me numerous times. I've been either 4-0, I was 5-0 at the GP, and you just get two bad hands, and in 2 matches in a row, or you lose the roll and you get a bad hand, and all of a sudden you've got 2 losses, and there was no way to salvage you just couldn't salvage those games. So over a short tournament, 4 or 5 round tournament, you think you're a champion and the deck is fantastic. But you start going into like a 9-round tournament where you've got to go maybe 8-1 or 7-1-1 or something in a 9-round tournament. It's tough to get 7 good hands, and maybe also be on the play when your hands aren't so great. So.
Yeah, and I think the white stacks deck has the particular problem compared to the other chalice decks that it actually plans to play more than like 5 turns because it's trying to really lock the opponent.
Yep.
So your mana base and not having library manipulation is more likely to catch up with you.
Yeah. Maybe we need to build a white stacks deck, Matt, that is basically mostly white, and then it just splashes green for like Horizon Canopies, for Draw Engine with Crucible, and then Sylvan Library for actual...
That's what I was actually thinking about.
Yeah.
I was like white-green stacks because, having Sylvan Library is fucking nutters.
That seems like a reasonable start. One of the things I regularly think about is to try to build land tax stacks or something like that.
Oh, let me tell you about land tax. Oh, yeah. I love that card.
Yeah, me too. I love playing Parfait and Old Vintage. Just because the deck was so fun, not because it was actually the greatest deck ever. It's just the land tax engine is so nice. It's so fun to play with.
I have a post in the pimp thread here. I'll post it in the chatter while Matt talks about Alex Trebek and Brian Adams. Hold on, let me find it here.
Okay. So I also wanted to talk about maybe cards to consider. So like how the metagame's going / not changing. Cards that would be good that maybe people aren't playing or are undervaluing in the current metagame. So I want to start because I want to talk more. So this Noble Fish deck that we were talking about is basically a deck full of X1s. So in case people were relatively unaware of what cards beat a deck like this, they should consider playing Golgari Charm and Zealous Persecution.
And Toxic Deluge is criminally underplayed right now.
Jesus Christ, no one's playing that card, and it's amazing. I don't know what people are doing. Maybe in Europe it's different, but have you seen a lot of Toxic Deluge around, Carsten?
No, but I wouldn't know either because what I'm playing is not something that loses to Toxic Deluge.
Oh, okay, fair. But you have...
I'm either playing Storm or Miracles, so even if they have it, I won't see it.
Oh, okay. I usually like to talk to people afterward and be like, oh, what's your sideboard? And, that's why I kind of get to see what people are playing. But yeah, definitely Deluge is underplayed.
The card is excellent. I have 2 in my Storm sideboard, actually. Not sure if it's good yet, because I've never drawn them when I was actually playing against Death and Taxes, or something else with Hate Bears, but...
Well, let's put it this way. I agree with you that I would play Deluge in a, Burning Wish sideboard or something like that. I think you still have to run Massacre, because sometimes free is just better. But I think if you have... There are particular situations where Deluge is just better.
Yeah, I might just be wrong to not run Massacre, but I have this insane fear of Teague, and I don't run Burning Wishes, so I just have the cards to board in.
I don't think you're insane for fearing Teague. I mean, most of the Miracles players I know have tattoos of Teague with the red, X around him. I mean, he is enemy number 1 as far as I know. Maybe Choke.
Both for Miracles and Storm, funnily enough, it's just nobody seems to be playing it anymore. But I can't shake that. I want to have an out to Teague.
It's true.
Feeling.
I definitely agree. Another card that's underplayed, definitely Teague. Nobody's playing that card. Why? I think a lot of people actually aren't in green-white anymore. Realistically, if we look at it, Death and Taxes, if they're splashing another color, probably splashes black, and that's been an okay deck that I've seen do well. The Bant deck should actually be running Noble Hierarch. Sorry, not Noble Hierarch, Gaddock Teague. I'm running it because I feel like Junk has better colors than Jund for combo. I'm playing 3 Teague in the board, and it's been great. Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, speaking of Green Suns, I think one of the big reasons we see less Teak and less Mirac and less Maverick is because Deathrite Shaman in a certain way invalidates the power of Green Suns.
Yeah.
Because one of the big strengths of Green Suns was that it's a Llanowar elf that also does something in the late game to get you utility. Deathrite does that without putting Dryad Arbor in your deck.
That's exactly right. It's the reason why Survival getting unbanned would just be a stone in the pond. I mean, if Green Sun is falling out of favor, Green Sun 3 out of 4 times is just... I mean, your long game with Survival is fantastic, but basically tapping out on the second turn to do nothing is miserable. I mean, if you tap out and Green Sun for one, at least you've accomplished something, and it's redundancy with survival is why it's astonishing that survival is still banned. I mean, ridiculous. But anyway.
I don't think I really agree on that. Survival is pretty dumb when it's legal.
Yeah, but it's just
Not
not,
in the
any
sense
dumber
that-
than... What is it dumber than? That it's happening now anyway.
No. The problem is not that it's actually broken in the sense that no deck can beat it. It's just that any creature deck that isn't playing survival is doing it wrong.
No, it's not. Elves wouldn't even play it. Elves would just play Green Sun.
No, you would just play both.
Then you have 8 slots dedicated to... Where's your...
To tutors in my combo deck? That seems good.
It's just slow. I mean, when elf decks are winning on the 3rd and 4th turn on the play now, survival doesn't really help that. You know what I mean?
No, but they don't. Yeah, the thing is, you don't need help with that. You need help with getting your board wrath twice, and that's what survival does.
Yeah, it can help you recover. I just think it's a slow enough card that eventually, yeah, you do get a lot of card advantage out of it. But we also live in a world now where we didn't have when survival was in play. We have Abrupt Decay. We have Phyrexian Revoker. We have
Surgical
Extraction. We have countless you can't search your library effects. There's just a lot of cards now. And we have Green Sun. I think that's the biggest one. I think we've got so many cards now that it would be a great... It would be a good card, but it wouldn't be any crazier than Show and Tell. It wouldn't be crazier than Lion's Eye Diamond. It wouldn't be crazier than Terminus. It wouldn't be crazier than Stoneforge.
I agree that it would be more powerful. The problem is, with survival, really is the Skull Clamp problem. There is no reason to run a creature deck that doesn't use survival as long as that card is legal. As long as the Vengevine engine is allowed to stay in place too.
That's a lot of spots. I mean, it's just a lot of slots to dedicate in your deck. You've got a lot of dead hands that have 2 Vengevines, 3 lands, and a whatever. You've got bad cards in your deck. Nice Basking Root Wall, and nice. It's just going to lead to some bad hands. I think it's a fantastic card. I think with my preference being some stuff gets unbanned first, but given what's out there right now, I don't think survival is. Given what's currently being played and the cards that are allowed to run loose, I just don't think survival is ban worthy. I would prefer to take other stuff off first. There's probably 2 or 3 cards that could come off long before survival, but
there are a couple of cards that don't do anything, so yeah, sure. As I said, the problem with survival isn't that it would dominate the meta like it did back in the day. The problem is just I think it would push out anything that's creature based that isn't survival based, just because just jamming a survival and 2 Vengevines and a Root Wall in your deck makes your deck insanely better.
Yeah, I mean, well, and 4 survivals. It's just not as fast. I don't know. I see games ending so quickly now, and we have Abrupt Decay, we have all these tools, we have Revoker, we have
Delver is also in the format. I mean, the name of Tempo has changed as well. I mean,
that's the other thing. I mean, you can get your engine online, assuming you play around days and do all this stuff. You might just be dead to a Delver. To me, Delver is so oppressive right now. It's the clock. It's what everything's sort of measured against. Being on the draw against Delver, put your deck against that, and do you have a hope to win? And just dicking around with survival might not even be, dicking around with survival might not even be enough.
Well, one of the things I always have to think about when you discuss survival is some of you might remember that I wrote an article at some point talking about banned battles where you could unban one of your cards.
Yeah.
One card from the banned list and just try that out.
That was I remember that article, and if you also remember, I started that thread.
Oh, yeah.
That was me.
Cool.
Anyway.
I didn't make the connection before. Nice.
Okay, but yes, I remember that because it's a really cool idea, I think, as well.
Yeah, we actually tried this a little here in Berlin, and one of the players here loved Vengevine Survival, so he obviously unbanned that, and I built the Necro deck, and we actually tested that. We actually tested those against another, and it was pretty much 50-50.
Huh.
Which tells me that survival is still pretty busted.
Well, that was before.
Even if you get to play Necros.
I mean, your Necro deck now would probably have Abrupt Decays, and it would probably be green-black Necro, just right. I mean,
no, it would probably still be a ritual-based combo.
Oh, your combo
Necro in some form. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, which should be a good matchup. Which should, in my opinion, have a good matchup against survival.
Yeah.
And it just didn't. I didn't lose more than half the games, but I lost quite a few more than I expected to lose.
Yeah, Swamp Ritual Necro.
Given that I was playing Necrostorm.
Should be a win most of the time.
Okay, so let's get back to cards to consider that we're talking about. So Deluge, Charm, Zealous Persecution, all, again, anti-True Name Nemesis, but also against these weenie decks that are kind of popping up. Gaddock Teague. I was also considering, I talked about Trigon Predator. Again, like Sean was saying, great hedge. Sean, do you want to expand a little bit?
Yeah, I just think if you're planning on fighting the equipment battle, I think Predator does everything you want. It eats their equipment. It's great holding equipment. You can Green Sun for it if you're playing a Green Sun build. It pitches to force. It has a reasonable amount of ass, so it doesn't worry about charm effects. It doesn't worry about punishing fire. It doesn't worry about a number of things. And then most of all, it evades. So it's probably if I was going to play something like that Bant deck, I definitely would have a couple of Trigons, in my board. So it's a fantastic card.
That sounds very reasonable.
Carsten?
That sounds really reasonable. I think Trigon is probably a pretty good card right now.
I mean, yeah, he dies to Bolt. I know people are going to be like, but he dies to Bolt, and it's like, well, what doesn't die to Bolt in this format?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, he also can trade with a Delver. Sounds sad, but I mean, there are some times when all you need to do in this world is to simply get something with 2 power in the air to not die to that wretched thing, and he does do that for what it's worth.
I mean, in the Bant deck, realistically, I mean, if you're casting Trigon on turn 2 against their turn 2 Stoneforge, you're swinging for 3 and killing their equipment that they just fetched for? Like, that seems okay.
Yeah, well, you keep them from playing the equipment, but yeah, same thing.
You know what I mean. It's good enough. Another card that we wanted to talk about, Fire Ice, because, what is it? Whatever his name is, Eric Rill, or whatever, the guy who won the most recent Thursday games with that 4-color garbage.
I really like that list.
I don't know.
I think it looks sweet.
It's interesting, but every time somebody goes into 4 colors, I'm like, why did this guy not get Blood Moon or Price of Progress out of the format? Like,
well, it's a tempo deck, really. I mean, how many tempo decks do actually have basics?
I know. I want it to happen.
I mean, Blood Moon's another.
Yeah, I can see that.
Blood Moon is another. You goldfish it. You can go 4-0 at a tournament when you run against 3 or 4 decks that all cave to it, and then you just get 2 bad matchups or 2 bad hands with Dragon Stompy, and same thing. You're just out. You get a crappy hand with Double Spirit Guide, Seething Song, Mountain Tomb, and you get pooped on.
Yeah, it's basically this. That's basically the secret of Blood Moon, I think. You have to find a deck that can both power out the early Blood Moon and that can win totally without ever casting Blood Moon.
Yeah.
That deck is called Imperial Painter.
Yeah, it's I think the closest we've gotten, which is why Painter is doing so well. But if you see some Painter games, you're really like, okay, this is not exactly what I'm afraid of when I'm hearing about broken Legacy decks.
People just don't pack it
up.
Don't
get me wrong, Painter's... Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Painter's a good deck. It's just, it still has a lot of work to do that it's not really equipped to do when it's playing against something that is totally immune to Blood Moon.
I mean, it's another deck that's hampered by card availability too. I mean, the stupid Judge foil is $175 now. So
yeah,
the average dude who's going to plop his $40 down into Star City, if he asks his 6 closest Magic friends if they have 4 recruiters, the answer is going to be a resounding fuck no. It's just not. And no one wants to spend, 175 times 4 on this card that actually has has very little utility anyway, outside of maybe EDH, I guess. Or it's just
it's Alluran, it's Painter, and
EDH. That's it.
Yeah.
The other card, Casali kind of falls into the Trigon Predator kind of thing. Fire Ice. So Eric Rill was playing this 1 of Fire Ice, and most of you should know this card, but I'll say what it is anyway. So Fire Ice is a split card from Apocalypse, or whatever, Judgment or garbage, whatever, like 2000, 2002, somewhere in there. And one half of it is a 1 in red instant that is basically an instant speed Forked Bolt, and the other side is a blue, so 1 in a blue, tap target permanent down, draw a card. So he's playing this in a tempo deck. He explained his choices on the Star City Games article, but I really like the card. I've liked it for a long time. So where I think this card has some play maybe in like a Rug mid-range deck, just being able to like nuke 2 creatures or a creature and, ding a planeswalker or tap down a blocker and attack in. Like, I think it has a lot of play because it's so flexible. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Fire Ice has always been good. It's just got so much more competition now. And, you brought up Fork Bolt. Fork Bolt sort of does the same thing, but it's also a sorcery, grows your Goyf. So a deck like, let's say, Rug Delver has a tough choice to make, right? You have Bolt, so obviously the best, but you've also got Chain Lightning, Fork Bolt. So you just have a lot more choices now. I mean, even something like is it Charm? You know, you compare
Yeah,
is it
yeah,
Charm?
Charm.
Yeah, compare is it Charm to Fire Ice. You could probably make arguments on both sides. You know, it's good when you need a counterspell. It's good when you need to kill Bob. It's good in the late game when you've been smart and held lands back and you can double loot. So I think it's just got a lot more competition. You know, if you've got 3 or 4 spots in your deck that can go to cute cards that are flexible. You know, Fire Ice just has more. In the old Werebear Thresh, for example, you know, those decks used to play Fire and Ice and Buku because there just wasn't as much competition. But now I just think you've got a little more competition. But I think it's a fine card.
Yeah, I think Fire. Same here. I think Fire is a good card. It's not something that is particularly well positioned or anything. It's just a good card, nice and flexible.
Probably a subtle
So
card too.
it-
The Enervate effect is probably underused, but being able to enervate a land, let's say, and sort of here, ready, time walk them, and that seems pretty good.
And then you get to cantrip, as they call it.
Yeah, back in my
Yeah.
day, we used to slow trip.
Oh,
I'll draw that
geez.
on the next upkeep.
Arcane Denial. Oh, so good.
Arcane 19 your own Moxes was fun.
Yeah, that's true. I
So
miss
any-
Turbo Stasis.
Only you.
Well, yeah,
I missed
in our battle
Speaking of really,
in our
of
battle
really-
of the unbanned, Black Vice is absolutely going to be my card. Not even a question.
I would actually be interested in people posting, like, we talked about it a little bit. I mean, I posted that thread a couple years ago. You wrote the article probably like a year or two ago. I mean, and we haven't really touched it since. I'd be interested in listeners kind of, I mean, there is a current, banned restricted list for Legacy. If people are interested in producing decks to kind of see, like, this is why this card, should not be unbanned, and this is why, and then have a deck with 4 of that card, I'd be very interested in having feedback.
You have to have some parameters. Like you just can't have the Moxen. Well, first of all, the Moxen are redundant. But second of all,
No.
you can't have Black Lotus, and you can't have Ancestral, and you can't have Time Walk. And
Obviously, it's the reasonable cards.
yeah, I
Like,
mean,
if
if you just
let's-
take it from Legends forward, maybe, or something. I don't know what the right spot is, but
Well, I think the spot is like this. Like, let's be realistic about what cards are not going to get unbanned. Power, things that involve manual dexterity, and anti.
yeah.
Everything
Yawgmoth's Will.
else-
How is Yawgmoth's Will going to lose ever?
Well, make a deck with it and show me why it shouldn't be unbanned.
Okay, all right, fair enough. But yeah, I get your point.
yeah, I mean, I think that is probably pretty. Jagmos Will, which is one of the reasons I didn't take this, probably pretty easy. You just take the Past and Flames out of Corin Storm and put in the Will and get a turn faster.
Exactly, and you get Korean Yawgmoth's Will. It's even better. Like, it costs 1 mana less, right? It's only 2. The Korean one.
Yeah, I in fact have the signed Korean one. It is a fierce. Another one, would be like I'd like Black Vice because it's just miserable to lose to a Vice under Stasis or under a Winter Orb. The other one is Balance. I see people on the message boards talking about Balance being something that could come off, and I can't even begin to wrap my head around how you could conceivably think Balance basically reads creatures suck, don't play them ever. The end.
Lands suck.
Lands
Artifact.
suck.
Well-
Everything but artifacts suck. The end. No matter
Well,
how
people
much you
also
thought you
argue
were
for
winning,
Oath.
you thought
so
you were fucking winning. You're not winning anymore. You lose. You lose, Iron Man. You lose.
Oath is also pretty ridiculous too.
yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. People regularly argue Oath should come off. It would just make creatures unplayable.
Oath
So-
reads creatures suck. Burn them. The end.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to do is actually we might have a bit of maybe a Star City Games article Everyday Eternal crossover with this contest.
Ah.
Maybe whoever, I don't know, we'll have to figure something out, but maybe whoever, I mean, we'll set up the details when we post the podcast, but perhaps
Man, we could
Whoever-
record live cockatrice sessions of us playing our broken decks against.
whoever creates the best argument for either unbanning or banning of a card will get a playset of dual lands. I'll supply the dual lands.
Wow, strong.
And by dual
All
lands,
right.
I mean,
By that you mean Adakar Waste. That cycle of dual lands.
nope.
Nope. Scabland. No.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But don't. I just put it into the chat to tell Sean. But
Oh yes,
I think-
yes, yes.
I think.
Yeah.
I think
Okay, those work.
we will definitely have. We will get somebody a playset of dual lands for their contribution. So,
All right.
so I think we should wrap it up because we're at like an hour and a half.
Yep. I got to roll and put some ice on my detached patella tendon. So, or now it's actually reattached. But yeah.
So thanks for listening to Everyday Eternal once again. Glad to be back, maybe on a little bit more of a regular schedule. So I'm Matt Pavlic.
Thanks for listening. I'm Sean O'Brien.
Yeah, thanks for listening. This is Carsten Kotter.
And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. We appreciate your feedback. Email us at everydayeternalcast@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/everydayeternalpodcast. And follow us on Twitter @eternalmtg.